Today I want to talk about something that affects us all, but the term isn't very well known. It's called Atlanticism. It's just what it sounds like, the US, Canada, and Europe having a political, military, and economic alliance. It's nothing new as the two sides of the Atlantic have shared allegiances for a long time. Like, France has been the US's ally since the very beginning and still is to this day, while Canada was first a Portuguese, then a French, and then a British colony. The reason why I want to make this video is because I want to respond to certain nationalists who believe in a Eurasian group. Let me start by pointing out that the Atlantic bond is in fact the most important in the world. The United States is the largest trading partner of the European Union, a two-way goods trade that is worth $699 billion. Many large companies have set up manufacturing and retail jobs in the other as a way to do business. One of my most important starting points of larger cooperation between both sides of the Atlantic began with the Marshall Plan in 1945. The main reason why the US wanted a free market Europe was so that they could buy American products.
And yet, in Europe, we still have barriers. They keep us apart. They make it hard to trade the goods we have for the goods we need. And we all need things we haven't got. Food from another land, perhaps. Work. Materials. Light and power. Medical services. And all of us need hope. Europe, divided as she is, does not fully use her wealth of land, of men and their skill. If these were fully used, freely used, Europe could provide for all.
But also many European economies suffered greatly after the Second World War, and in 1947 there were even pro-communist rallies in France and Italy. The plan sought to use US aid to combat instability and drive out fertile fields for socialism that would be supported by the USSR. The plan actually was a success, and by 1950 the western part of the continent had eclipsed pre-war levels. It was also estimated that in 1951 output was 35% higher than in 1938. According to statistics, $3.9 billion had been spent of imports of raw material, another $3.2 billion was on food and fertilizers, $1.9 billion on machines, and of course $1.6 billion went to fuel. This period had been the fastest growth in European history, and although it wasn't the initial factor, it sped up Western Europe's growth over the next 2 decades. Certain companies such as Glencore, Eni, and Carrefour were able to start due to the economic recovery and still stand today. Now, many critics of the Marshall Plan say that it was just a pretense for American domination and that to this day Europe is a pawn of the US. To that I say, suck my fucking dick! You need to look at this on both sides. The US needs Europe in order to have the political might it has now. Not only the EU, but they also need Japan, Saudi Arabia, and in some cases, China. The same goes for the military. The US wouldn't have the military reach it had now without Europe and Japan, since US bases and missile defenses are stationed there. Again, it needs Europe, hence the help of Atlanticism. Now, let me explain how Europe contributes to North America. In 2015, the US saw foreign investment at $348 billion, the majority of which came from European companies. The investment between the EU and the US is the real driver of the transatlantic relationship, contributing to growth and jobs on both sides. Moreover, it influences trade figures positively, as it is estimated that a third of the trade actually consists of intra-company transfers. European FDI stocks in the US more than doubled between 2007 and 2012, only showing slightly lower US stocks in Europe. Since 2006, both sides have recorded a positive balance with outward stocks exceeding inward stocks. Now back to European help in the US. Several German companies have set up manufacturing jobs in the US. One prime example is BMW, which has set up factories in the states such as Georgia or South Carolina. Furthermore, traveling to the frozen north, the EU is a strategic partner for Canada. It is the second largest trading partner and investor. Trade between the two amounts to $66 billion, aka 1.8% of the EU's external trade and 9.5% of Canada's external trade in 2015. Like the US, investment is also a key driver, with European investors mounting to 275 billion euros and Canadian investors totaling to 166 billion euros in 2014. Trade goods consist of machinery, chemicals, transport, and retail, and with CETA signed, oil and gas could now be traded, but I'll get to that in a little bit.
An historic moment in Brussels. After 7 years of negotiations, the European Union and Canada have signed the landmark Comprehensive and Economic Trade Agreement, or CETA. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau joined European Council President Donald Tusk and other EU officials in the Belgian capital after weeks of uncertainty following opposition to the treaty from within Belgium.
For our citizens, I have no doubt that the so-called provisional application, the implementation, practice, will be the best form of education, much better than persuasion or words. And this is for me the main ground of our very cautious optimism.
The 28 EU member states reached the consensus needed on Friday.
Of what is in CETA. Small businesses, consumers will start to feel the benefits of this immediately, even before all the 28 different parliaments proceed with their ratification steps for that final step. So we are confident that demonstrating that trade is good for the middle class and those working hard to join it throughout the region will make sure that everyone gets that this is a good thing for our economies, but it's also a good example to the world.
It's hoped the deal, which removes 98% of tariffs, will bring a trade increase worth some 10.9 billion euros per year.
Regarding the military, Europe contributes a lot as well. Germany has Air Force units stationed at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico and naval units stationed at Pensacola Naval Air Station in Florida. Italy also has training bases in the US at Shepherd and Eglin Air Force Base. British forces are stationed at Suffield in Alberta, Canada. So there we go. NATO is important to both sides of the Atlantic. During Hurricane Katrina, European forces were sent to rebuild, maintain order, and of course, all countries answered Article 5 for the war in Afghanistan, unlike the war in Iraq, where everyone except the UK and Poland refused. So, let me make a response to certain populists. One of my friends said that after World War II, the European coal and steel community, the earliest form of the European Union, should have included all European countries, including the Soviet Union. Look, that is not the best option at all. First of all, not all European countries wanted to join the new European alliance. It was criticized for failing to achieve several aims of the Treaty of Paris and didn't define a proper energy policy. It would also take time before it met all the needs of every member state, and that is how the EU is still evolving today. The other point I wanted to make was that half of Europe was indeed under Soviet control, and let's examine how that worked out. This is what West Berlin looked like in 1955, only 10 years after World War II. Looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Well, let's see how East Berlin looked like in that same time period. Doesn't look so nice, does it? To this day, unemployment is about 3.5% higher in the West, and it didn't start declining until 2005. The transition was costly, and between 1.5 and 2.5 trillion dollars of aid are being sent, and they're gonna be doing so until 2019. The difference between the two sides is even visible from space, as the West is lit by green light, which had a head start on renewable energy, while the East has yellow light, which mainly got its energy from coal. The trend is also seen in many European nations, as Soviet socialism was not seen as an alternative to Western capitalism. Collectivized agriculture led to famine, rationing of funding didn't leave much room for development, the East could never keep up with the industrial growth of the West, suppression of religion, culture, and travel made people angry, and of course no one likes suffering the humiliation of driving a Yugo. Yet it still surprises me how people support socialism.
To this day, after the time in history when it was founded, we still need communism. Now, for any of you who don't know, communism is the idea of a nation sharing the wealth. And while some people call it distributing, I have two reasons. One, poor people, we really can't have poor people. It's not good for like a whole class of people to be poor. People need money. We can't just let people be around just be homeless because as they can't get jobs. Money is important, so that's another reason we need communism. And secondly, some people might say, oh, we have welfare. Welfare just promotes lazy people. And I don't know, but I'm pretty sure welfare, especially down in the United States, costs a bit of moolah. So yeah, all those morons saying that communism is the same as welfare, you can go leave because you are just an absolute moron. Just look up the definition of that. I'm sorry I got a little heated, but when people say it's the same as welfare, I get really angry. Anyway, yeah, that's why we still need communism. Bye.
Kid, finish school first and then make judgments.
Hey guys, so as you can see, I'm wearing red, and what color is what is associated with red? It's a certain political belief called communism. And I kind of identify as a communist in my political beliefs.
Lol, this kid's father's like, what the hell did I create? But anyway, we all know how Russian-controlled Europe looked like. I mean, in 1948, Yugoslavia left the Eastern Bloc. In 1961, Albania did too. China, although it wasn't a part of Europe, was no longer a Soviet ally by the late 1960s. Even Hungary and Czechoslovakia tried to break off in 1956 and 1968.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And look how it is today. On average, 67% of Western Europeans view Russia negatively, and that percentage in Eastern Europe countries who were once part of the Warsaw Pact see an even higher disapproval of Russia. Many pro-Russian supporters will use the argument that Europe gets its gas from Russia, but stemming from what I said earlier, CETA can change all that. Canada has the third largest oil and gas reserves in the world, just 1 point above Russia, and LNG transportation is pretty cheap. As we have seen, LNG terminals are being built in St. John's, Nova Scotia, while another is being built in northern Spain. A perfect alternative to Russian gas. We as Western countries need each other, and one place where Atlanticism can excel should be focused on making the Atlantic relationship more outward-looking and making a conscious effort to engage more with Australia and Japan, as well as emerging powers like India or Brazil. It can also work on climate change while achieving greater energy security. I also support the idea of North American ships tackling migrants in the Mediterranean while the US adopts more European-like welfare. The transatlantic partnership is special in a way that others aren't. We do not pursue different visions of global order, and we are not geopolitical rivals. Both sides of the Atlantic have a lot to gain from upgrading relations with one another. Ours is a natural partnership, and is only natural that we deepen it.